This is Dr. Briggs, back again for the sequel, horror fam, and if you're also one of our returning cast, then come closer, because tonight I have something scary to show you. Life's tough when you're a carryover character in a horror sequel. If you're lucky, your face will show up again in a picture frame, because they couldn't afford to pay your actor again. If you're not so lucky, your face might not show up at all. But one thing's assured, as soon as you show up in a sequel, unless you're one of a lucky few, your frames are numbered.
You'll never come back again.
In which case, the best thing you can hope for is a memorable send-off, in which you go out with dignity, and maybe a little heroism. But fat chance. More than likely, you're going to be treated like the audience doesn't know you, or if they do, that they're just itching to watch you bite the bullet. So, filmmakers will most often write you out in the most cut-rate way they can. In the following list, we are going to show you the 10 worst ways we found returning characters written off in their final unhappy return. TalkHorror presents the 10 worst ways to die in the sequel. Number 10. Dying in name only. I kinda grew up with 1986's House, and found its hero, Roger Cobb, to be a likable guy. It was always fun watching him beat the house, escape, and reunite with his estranged wife and long-lost son. When I learned that Roger Cobb was back in Part 4, I wanted to catch it so bad I bought the VHS. Even though I had been told that, out of nowhere, he now had a different wife, an older kid, and a haunted house in the middle of a desert. Roger dies by mobsters in the first 15 minutes of House 4. And besides never referencing his ex-wife or his other haunted house, there is literally nothing stated in this film to imply that this Roger Cobb, played by William Catt, is the same man as this Roger Cobb, played by William Catt in the first House movie. So, yay? But if you're gonna kill off a different character in all but name, then why even get the same man to play a man with the same name? Cheap drama? Or maybe they just wanted to drop a hint that the ghost haunting this house is really a good guy. Even when in the meantime he tortures his own family with twisted visions, because that's apparently necessary to bring the ones who killed him to justice. Number 9. Getting killed to show off the new monster. Okay, now imagine you're from a film in which most of the characters survive. You were a minor character in the first one, but now you're one of only a handful in the series to make a return appearance. And then you're the only one from that handful to die afterwards. Miguel didn't do much but survive in Tremors, so despite the fact that he helps out at one point, beats the odds, and doesn't end up a less memorable graboid victim, people weren't so shocked at his survival because they probably barely noticed him to begin with. But if Bert and Earl were still cool in Tremors 2, he figured, hey, maybe Miguel will prove himself in Tremors 3.
Breaker?
The only thing Miguel proves is that despite his inexplicable survival in Tremors, he really was cannon fodder the whole time.
Should have shot sooner. How could you know it was going to take off like a goddamn rocket?
Sorry, rocket fodder. And as it goes with the deaths of rocket fodder,
we discovered him, right? So we should name him.
The cast is back to cracking jokes after a scene jump.
Okay, blast offers.
Miguel's ultimate claim to fame was that he was the first recorded victim
Ass blasters, how's
of
that?
something called an ass blaster.
Sounds like a porno film.
It could have been any character, really. Even one they created specifically to die to the ass blaster. But it was you. Go Miguel. Number 8. Dying to bring back the villain. In the events of the third Elm Street film, Kristen Parker, Joey Crusoe, and Roland Kincaid, 3 of them, from the title, managed to banish Freddy Krueger from our plane. Through the power of lucid dreaming and through sheer refusal to give up, Kristen kept Freddy distracted from finishing off her friends. Joey destroyed a hall of mirrors full of Freddy's clones, and Kincaid got perhaps the most important role, when he called Krueger a pussy.
Kruger! Pussy!
All 3 of these would-be dads actually managed to return to normal lives with something to be happy about. But because the Hollywood sequel machine doesn't like happily ever afters, their victory would not be a lasting one, as the Fat Boys would teach us in the next film's theme song.
Even in Part 3, the dream
and none of them failed as badly as Kincaid. See, while Kristen got to pass her power on to a friend, and Joey got to see boobs before he died, Kincaid not only fails to survive or even inconvenience Freddy in his second go-round, but he also gets the dubious honor of being an actual example of the black guy who dies first. Not only that, this means that it's his fear of Freddy that ultimately brings the killer back to the dream world and allows him to kill his fellow two survivors without much of a fight. Number 7. Getting killed in the comic spin-off. Though it may be against the spirit of Wes Craven's original film, it's undeniably satisfying to see Doug Bukowski in the Hills Have Eyes remake become a beast in order to save his family. And since that change in direction worked so well, the filmmakers must have thought it'd be even more of a treat for the audience if they found out that Doug died between movies. But wait, despite the ominous binocs, if you remember The Hills Have Eyes 2, Doug and fam don't show up at all, even as corpses. I know guys, but that's just because the studio decided to relegate wrapping up their story to the pages of a comical, yet canonical, comic book. The Hills Have Eyes, The Beginning, which tells the story of remake Jupiter's slightly less underwhelming cousin Hades, and gives us the ultimate fate of the man who Jupiter's clan was unable to take down. Doug suggests to Bobby and Brenda, who are now apparently 11 and 12 years old, that they split up. Doug gets pwned in the panel jump. Or maybe he just collapses from heat exhaustion, it's not really clear, and gets dragged off for what is called a quick and painless death. That's right, even when they don't have to worry about getting the actor back or writing a potentially costly death scene in the sequel, they still kill him off screen. And some hours later, the baby he killed to protect gets surrounded by wolves. But don't act like this is a disrespectful way to handle a character the audience grew to like, because the writers acknowledged that he was a fighter. Not only do Bobby and Brenda survive, showing Doug didn't need to die in order for the plot to go on, but since there was only one road back to the gas station and more than one mutant hunting them, I can't think of a reason why they would split up in the first place, barring some cabin-in-the-woods shenanigans.
We'd better split up.
Number 6, made out to be a villain and killed off-screen. Puppet Master is a series with precious few recurring biological characters. Outside of Andre Toulon, who's a ghost for most of the series, and Danny Coogan, but who watched these movies after Part 6, the one you're most likely to remember is Rick Myers.
No relation.
Titular Puppet Master of Parts 4 and 5. Rick is the first one since Toulon to treat the puppets more like friends than like weapons, and the first one we see using them to fight a more primal evil than other humans. It's surprisingly entertaining action fantasy, and Rick was the perfect character to usher the series into this unprecedented new genre.
I am with you, Puppet Master.
But since it's full moon, the next and last time we see Rick show up is in Puppet Master: The Legacy. It's a clip show, and its framing segment sets out to smear as many old characters in as little original footage as possible. This includes making the little boy from Part 3 out to be a petty little monster, making Toulon out to have always been the mind-rotted villain he was in Part 2, and having poor Rick die from being shot by a corny assassin before the movie even begins.
Of course I got it. What do you think? 2 shots and 2 more to be sure.
2 shots and 2 more to be sure.
Also, the assassin ends up being the good guy and the puppets were suffering the whole time.
I'm not here for the secret of bringing these puppets to life. I want to know what makes them die. For good. I was sent here for the secret by the creatures Toulon left behind. Souls trapped in wooden bodies, living every day in agony.
Monkey needs a hug.
And not only that, but when the new footage references Rick, it uses his actor's name instead.
Gordon was a bright young man, a scientist.
I know all about that kid. Who do you think took 4 bullets?
Speaking of, could you really not get Gordon Curie for a day of filming Full Moon? All he was doing at the time was starring in Left Behind movies.
so easily manipulated.
Well, actually, he was probably getting a fatter paycheck than we'd expect.
Who is the puppet here?
Number 5. Getting killed by the next main protagonist after your epic cliffhanger. When it comes to a series unceremoniously killing off its best characters, there's no more prolific franchise than Saw. If I hadn't restricted myself to one character per franchise, half this list could be made up of Saw characters. And the biggest disappointment of them all was the fate of Jeff Denlin, or Reinhardt if you trust the back of the DVD cover. The lesson John wanted Jeff to learn was all about how wrath solves nothing. A lesson Jeff is made to face over and over again as he sees the humanity in people he once fantasized about killing, culminating in Jeff ultimately being the one to kill the Jigsaw Killer himself. The ultimate revenge for the ultimate price.
The price of living for nothing but vengeance. I am the only person who knows where your daughter is, and if you want to get her back, you'll have to play a game.
So what will happen to Jeff, Corbett, and the final game? With this question lingering in our minds, it felt really frustrating sitting through Saw 4, ostensibly taking place some nebulous time after John's death. There's this SWAT guy who Eric kind of talked to in Saw 2, and Eric is there too, but he doesn't say or do much of anything, and these two FBI guys are following the SWAT dude as he tries to rescue Eric. And then, we learn that the events of Saw 4 were actually taking place at the exact same time as those of Saw 3. At which point, we finally become invested. What will become of the man who killed Jigsaw?
You see your fucking hands? Where is my daughter? You
Two shots.
And then we waited another year to confirm he really was dead, and then we got treated to a film starring this idiot. Number 4. Going from Final Girl to Sacrifice. As we've already covered in our Halloween 6 Facts video, screenwriter Daniel Farrens considered Jamie Lloyd, Laurie Strode's daughter from Halloween Parts 4 and 5, to be an important character to the lore, who deserved to go out fighting if she was going to go out at all. After all, her life had been made a living hell since she was in grade school, thanks to the Cult of Thorn sending their agent Michael Myers to kill off every member of his family. Yet she's remained brave throughout it and managed to evade Michael's grasp for far longer than you'd expect a kid to be able to. Regardless of this, however, Jamie's story has always had the element of inescapable tragedy. After all, she's not safe so long as her Uncle Michael is still alive.
Never die.
But if Michael ever really dies, it's implied that she would be cursed to take his place. So that's why when Part 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, came around, the filmmakers thought the most tragic ending would be if Michael just fucked her so he'd have more family to stalk in hypothetical movies to come. I mean as a ritual of darkness. Not only does the thus far asexual killing machine Michael Myers become a rapist here for the purposes of killing his teenage niece's baby, but his victim gets to go out in a manner befitting a real exposition character, completely unable to fight back against him in any real way.
You can't have the baby, Michael.
Save for hiding their baby, because the baby's more important than she is now that she's grown up. And she doesn't so much as curse him as she dies, but reaches out to try to hug him instead. Number 3. Getting killed to connect an unrelated film to the one you starred in. Now, thus far, we haven't seen that many bad guys on this list. Well, except for Toulon's villainous protege, Gordon. With villains, not only are they less likely to survive the last film to start with, but their deaths don't really seem as disappointing, because it's probably the whole thing we caught the sequel to see in the first place. But what about when the movie in question isn't a sequel? Well, that's the case in American Psycho 2, All-American Girl. It was originally meant to be a completely unrelated film about a serial killer's collegiate origin. Because of I don't know what, the filmmakers felt that this specifically was the perfect story to tie American Psycho's satirical maniac Patrick Bateman into. So they shot this intro with star Mila Kunis voiceover.
You know how some babysitters take you to the movies or rollerblading in the park? Mine brought me along on a date with a serial killer. Patrick Bateman.
Okay, so the first potential thing that people may take issue with is the fact that Patrick Bateman is unambiguously a murderer in real life here. But let's pick it apart a little further.
Patrick Bateman.
A notoriously vain character wearing an ill-fitting robe and ill-fitting bright yellow disposable kitchen gloves.
Patrick Bateman.
Dating a babysitter in what looks like an upper-class suburban home at what is apparently his elite-class New York apartment.
Clara was my babysitter. I was only 12 years old.
This babysitter bringing her charge to a date with a socialite.
Patrick Bateman.
A notoriously vain character accepting a date when his personal grooming isn't even done.
Patrick Bateman.
Bumbling about whilst this little girl gets free from these 3 haphazardly fastened strips of duct tape.
Patrick Bateman.
Doing something to this girl's lower regions that's making her nose bleed. And finally, this little girl killing Patrick Bateman in a cutaway.
The FBI quickly uncovered a psychopath.
To set up for why she wants to join the FBI.
I silently vowed to devote my life to stopping other psycho killers. I couldn't wait to grow up.
What the fuck? Number 2. Having your iconic heroic sacrifice taken back so you can make a worse heroic sacrifice in the sequel. I just want to say first that I am a fan of Exorcist III. I haven't even seen the director's cut and I'm a fan of Exorcist III. So it feels a little weird to include this character on the list. But if you're a fan of the man who sacrificed himself to rescue a girl from the devil's clutches in the original Exorcist, then you may not be a fan of the fact that Father Damien Karras didn't die on that staircase sending the demon back to hell. No, he survived that fall, and he still managed to send that demon back to hell. And immediately ended up possessed by a different evil spirit.
It was quite an effort to regenerate his puny little brain cells.
Because Father Karras didn't do a good enough job of killing himself to save Reagan, he's instead had the privilege of spending the past 15 years serving as home base to the Gemini Killer, who's made it his personal mission to make up for the modest body count in The Exorcist by hunting down the film's other heroes. On the one hand, it's a genius way to get you to hate a villain and drive home the idea of an unfair physical world. On the other, it's just kinda gross. So how are they gonna possibly give Father Karras a proper send-off this time around? He's already made the ultimate sacrifice once.
Damien! Fight!
Kill now! Shoot now! Kill me now!
Father Damien Karras was dead to us once. Now he is dead again. Hallelujah.
Exorcist 666 Demon Karras Revenge!
Number 1. Dying and taking the whole series with you. In the Phantasm fandom, to call Reggie a popular character would be an understatement. That's the reason why we saw less and less of the series' original main character, Michael Pearson, as the story went on, and the reason why it's instead Reggie, who is so often portrayed as the villainous tall man's greatest rival. So that's why it's so fitting that in the final movie, Phantasm RaVager, they turned the entire series into Reggie's remarkably detailed dementia-induced hallucination. No, really.
Dementia. Early onset.
All the weapons he's assembled over the years, all the types of monsters he's been consistently facing, every town he's driven to without getting locked up or wrecking the car, everything Mike was doing while Reggie wasn't watching him, was all part of Reggie's dementia-induced hallucination. Reggie's actually dying in a nursing home, though he can still carry on coherent conversations most of the time and has fantasy sequences with perfectly lucid dialogue.
Mine had a chrome-plated 9mm loaded with steel-jacketed. It was in the glove box. Early onset.
Reggie's dementia was apparently so severe at 43 years old that he imagined a human-faced worm coming out of a girl's back.
Early onset.
But luckily, I'd have to guess, the disease's progression just kind of halted there and allowed his mind to survive another 25 years. Did his brain cells regenerate or something? Is this a different guy named Reggie? Did someone shoot him in the head, but not twice to be sure? Because that's not what fucking dementia looks like. That's called being Hollywood insane.
Schizophrenia is an illness.
But I guess they just couldn't pass up the lovely opportunity afforded by the fact that yes, Reggie and company are now old. Alas, Reggie passes and his mind drifts contentedly back into the hellscape that is the Phantasm universe that the audience fell in love with. It's like that one episode of Buffy if it was a series finale and Buffy died. The best part is there's never any substantial nods to that old continuity to latch onto.
The grave robbing guy from another dimension?
It's all starting to run together.
It's time to let go. I can't think of a worse way to die in the sequel than dying and taking the whole series mythos with you. I wish this whole list was a dementia-induced hallucination.
No, it's not.
Have you ever seen a character get treated worse in the sequel than any of those poor individuals, horror fam? If so, sound off in the comments below and let's debate. For right now, I hope you enjoyed the video and hope you'll be returning next time for more recommendations from TalkHorror. And if you really enjoyed this video, be sure and hit it with 2 shots in the like button and 2 shots in the subscribe button, just to be sure. Wait.
You have dementia. You have dementia.
2 shots and 2 more to be sure. 2 shots and 2 more to be sure. Two shots and 2 more to be sure.
I'm gonna date with toxic bait. I'm gonna date with toxic bait.
Like a goddamn rock.